Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this session, and thank you for the organizers for inviting us. I'm going to speak a little bit about Swedish civil defense. It was an issue that we touched upon, or the civilian defense was an issue that we touched upon a little bit the last session yesterday, and but then a little bit in a different tone. The type of civilian defense that I will be speaking of is not so much civil resistance as or NGO activism as the state's efforts to protect the population. I say a little bit about the FOI, the organization that I'm from, and then I'll talk a little bit about the assignments that we did for the Civil Contingencies Agency that sums up the topic for today. The FOI is a research organization connected to the Swedish MOD, roughly 1,200 employees. I come from the social science division. We do different types of research efforts now, also supporting the Swedish military, but also the wider total defense system as a whole. We have a lot of activity on Ukraine since the full-scale invasion, but more importantly, since the Crimean annexation in 2014, there has been a lot of activities, and it's a high priority for us. So this to come here was more than natural. I myself come from an edge of this research environment that focuses on strategic communications, psychological defense, and that kind of thing. So maybe there will be a little bit of a tilt in that direction. Just to sum up the main points for the Swedish civilian defense, looking at this topic, it's a little bit difficult to say that we adapted a system or made grand adaptations after 2022. Rather, it was after the hybrid warfare in Georgia in 2008 and Crimea in 2014 that the Swedish system woke up, if you will. So we had white papers from early 2010s talking about the Russian problem and the threat assessments the coming years. And after 2015-16, things started to move for real. So if you talk about adaptation institutionally, it has been the last 10 years, maybe, not so much the last 2 years. The NATO membership is, of course, something that will be of great importance for us. The requirements on civil defense will have to be aligned with the goals of the Swedish civil defense, and that is not an easy alignment because they are a little bit different. So this is something that we're working on currently. But we have a government that takes civil defense really seriously. There's a new minister for civil defense, and as I will show you later on, there will be the government has raised the budget considerably for these efforts. Even the FOI received research money to carry out research on this area, something that we've been pushing on for years. So we are happy also. But the main points and that I will be talking about in terms of adaptations is maybe reciting a little bit from yesterday's and the recent presentation on drone warfare, etc., that the new types of warfare requires new types of thinking for our civilian defense as well. The Swedish total defense concept, for those of you who do not know it, dates back from the post-war period, but in its current articulation, it consists of two main parts, and it's the civilian and the military. There used to be two other branches as well, psychological and economic defense, but these are now subsumed under civilian defense. And normally, when you talk about these things, there's some areas that fall outside of the traditional civilian defense, and those are the psychological defense, schools, migration, cyber issues. And for those keen of you who have noticed, these issues that fall outside of the traditional civilian defense are some of the most pertinent issues in Ukraine right now. So this has really urged us to think, how can we develop the work that is currently carried out in the Swedish system? The total defense concept you see here, this is an image from the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency. It's just to show how it sort of relates. The development of the civil defense policy has been throughout the years in what I used to call the Kraft document. Kraft means power in Swedish. So here you have resistance. It's called power to resist. And Värnkraft, the same. And here's the power to act and collecting power. So these are a few documents, there are others as well, that outline the new types of threat that Swedish defense faces, and also set some priorities with regard to actions. And 2 years back, the civil defense system was changed altogether. So a new organization was introduced, and one of the most important things was a new regional organization that matches up with, so the civilian defense regional organization is now aligned with the military organization. It didn't used to be that way, and that caused some deficiencies. But now we have 6 regions, and so does the defense. Another adaptation to the new security situation was to introduce 10 civil defense sectors, and these are those sectors. They're not quite accurately translated, but summarized as follows. So one thing that has popped up, for example, now is the supply of data for the public sector. And with the Ukrainian management of data and the public sector data put in on the cloud, this really brought some significant inputs to the Swedish system. So this is a huge area that we're currently working on. But in all of these sectors, you have one agency that is responsible for the whole, and several other agencies that is within each cluster, so to speak. So they are all doing projects right now to implement the lessons learned. And I was the project manager of the FOI support of the Civil Contingencies Agency when they received the assignment from the government to draw lessons from Ukraine. It was last year, and we finished the reports early 24. The final report came out this summer. And the lessons learned in the Swedish context will be drawn from these objectives, the grand objectives with the civilian defense. And I may be focusing on this one a little bit more because this is my area of expertise. So I will just do some of the lessons learned for you, and you have to keep up because it's a lot. I could do a rap maybe of this, but I will just. So one is, for example, the construction of incivility points. How, when, and where. So the Ukrainian experience tells us that these are crucial aspects, whereas in the Swedish context, they are more. This is not yet developed. The idea to use cell broadcast to transfer warnings to the population. The refurbishment of the bomb shelters. Not all basements or buildings are suitable to be bomb shelters. You need, they can be death traps if you not have the right ventilation or possibilities to exit. The importance of local politicians to promote, to counter disinformation, to show the population where to go, and to provide local leadership when and if national leadership fails. The idea of psychic or mental health. A huge problem in Ukraine has been the many people who are traumatized by the war. And this would not be others in the Swedish context. So how do we deal with a large section of the civilian defense staff maybe being traumatized? They're not used to war. They have not received training for that. So we have to plan that a large portion of the people will be maybe not working at full capacity. Funeral planning. Deposit sites for goods shouldn't be centralized. How to repair the electricity grid, how to repair the mobile grid. So the Ukrainians have been very, very good at repairing. Whereas in Sweden, we don't have exactly the same equipment, and the high-tech infrastructures also require high-tech competence to fix it. So how do we deal with those bottlenecks? Yesterday, we also spoke about the public sector rules, the administration that causes so much trouble for us, or for people who want to get things done quickly. And that is a thing that Ukraine has been very good at, and some of the people in this room are testament to that. But in Sweden, as it stands, this is not normally the case. So how do we adapt our procedures to still maintain a public administration that is accountable and transparent, but get things done? And this is one of the sort of meta issues that I think a lot of political scientists are working on right now. The willingness to defend has been an issue that we discussed a lot in Sweden and continue to discuss. In Ukraine, the thought was that the willingness to defend was low, maybe also by the Russians, whereas it turned out that it was quite the contrary. In Sweden, it's considered to be high, but we don't know how it will act out in the case of war. No one has tried it for 200 years in Sweden, so how will the willingness to defend play out in the event of war? Or how will it develop in the event that the war effort is successful or not? Those questions are key issues for the people who plan for the civilian defense. How will we protect our cultural heritage, or how will we not make it possible for the adversary to use cultural issues as a weapon against us, to seize culture as an area of information and psychological warfare? This is a question that I myself am struggling with, and this will also be an issue going forward. And finally, the protection of critical data structures. Again, provision of data in a high information state apparatus is crucial. So, can we store our data in the cloud? How, if, and when? This is one of the main lessons that I think I will be working on for the coming years. The government has, as I said, made civilian defense also to a priority, realizing that if you don't fund the civilian effort and only fund the military effort, the society will fall. Because what is left to protect if the population is dying? So this is the plan for the coming 5-year period, and so it will land on 15 billion crowns, which is, let's say, we can approximate 10 crowns to 1 euro. So 150 million euros annually. And this is on an average level of what the Civil Contingencies Agency asked for. So they asked for more to do everything, but this is a good start. In conclusion, I think the adaptation has been since 2014 rather than 2022. That is the main point, right? But in 2022, the sense of urgency became higher in Sweden. So when I talk to people working in the different sectors, there is a sense of urgency, but it's also difficult to plan. We can't compare exactly to Ukraine. The war might look completely different. It's easy to fall into the trap that the scenario we live in now will be the scenario that will come in the future. So all of those issues make it quite difficult for the civilian defense planners. The Russian disregard for civilian lives is a major concern for us. So we stopped building bomb shelters 20 years ago. So all buildings that have been built after that do not have bomb shelters. How do we deal with those things? Will people act in solidarity with each other, given that there's a need, or will they be selfish? We do not know. These are questions that has been on our minds lately. There's a lot of interest in Ukraine in Sweden. It's a high priority politically and on all levels. Also to learn from the Ukrainian experience. And finally, the modern threats, maybe such things as drones or drone swarms, swarm warfare in general, has shifted a little bit the attention towards other issues, but we don't know what comes. So following the discussion yesterday, whether or not the type of warfare will be a modern one or a mixture of traditional or old warfare, if you will, this sets us in a difficult position. But these are the kind of adaptations that we can look at and see today. The report with all these lessons learned is in Swedish. I can provide it to you if you want. You can maybe Google Translate it. You can just catch me afterwards. Thank you.
And we have a few questions and very little time for answers, so let's try to keep them short.
I think I kept my timeline, though. Huh?
Most Western countries struggle to properly stockpile enough essential supplies needed for crisis. How has Sweden managed this?
Well, I wasn't told because it's a secret. I think the idea is we didn't have stockpiles during the pandemic, for example. So that was, as with many countries, Finland was the good example there. I think we're trying to learn to stockpile new wares as we go. But for example, warehousing becomes an issue. So we have to make sure that you don't have too much central stockpiles because that becomes a liability. But I think this project is ongoing. Also, it's distributed on, for example, agencies and local resident centers, so that given that the logistics are out, there will be a possibility to still maintain life for people.
And what differences can you see between mentalities of Western societies and Ukrainians?
Come again?
Mentalities.
The mentalities. Oh, well, I think I'm not an expert on Ukrainian culture, so my experiences with not only Ukraine but the Baltics, Poland, Czech Republic, also a little bit Russian, is that there is like the Swedish faith in the state, that someone else will do or some system will take care of everything. And combined with the non-experience of any type of conflict for the last 200 years becomes a little bit of a difficult variable for us to plan. And also Sweden is a highly individualistic society. So the feeling of togetherness and community and maybe nationhood that we see in Ukraine today may or may not be as pertinent in Sweden as this. So it's difficult until it's tested and put on a hard test. We really can't say. But to be fair, Sweden is much more high-tech in the sense that everyone relies on, we don't even use cash anymore at all. And people are highly individualistic. And I think that can become a liability.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.